This ends now.
What are you doing?
Whoa, put it down!
Don't move.
Harlem in the early 1980s was a neighborhood caught between decay and ambition. The buildings were scarred by poverty, unemployment was everywhere, and entire blocks felt abandoned by the system. Yet inside that struggle, another economy was exploding beneath the surface. Money flowed through the streets faster than many people had ever seen before. Luxury cars appeared outside run-down apartment buildings. Teenagers wore expensive leather jackets and gold chains while older residents watched in disbelief. For some, it looked like success. For others, it looked like the destruction of a community in real time. And at the center of that world were three young men whose names would become legendary across New York City. Rich Porter, Alberto Alpo Martinez, and Azie Faison. Before the headlines, before the documentaries, before the betrayals and bloodshed, they were simply young men from Harlem trying to escape poverty. What made their story different was how quickly they rose, how much power they accumulated, and how violently everything eventually collapsed. Azie Faison was older than both Rich and Alpo, and in many ways he represented the blueprint. Growing up in Harlem during the 1970s, Faison had seen the heroin era dominate the streets before cocaine transformed the city. Unlike many young hustlers, Azie was known for being disciplined and intelligent. He understood early that survival in the underground economy depended not only on courage but on strategy. He avoided unnecessary attention, studied the people around him, and learned how money moved through Harlem. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, cocaine had begun replacing heroin as the most profitable business on the streets. The demand was enormous. Dealers who once struggled to survive suddenly found themselves making thousands of dollars in a single day. Harlem became one of the centers of that explosion. Azie moved carefully through this new world. He built connections, developed supply relationships, and slowly earned a reputation as someone reliable and organized. But even as his influence grew, he remained cautious. He had already seen what happened to many men who became too visible. Names like Nicky Barnes and Frank Lucas had shown both the possibilities and dangers of power in Harlem. Wealth brought attention. Attention brought investigations, rivalries, and violence. Then came Rich Porter. Rich Porter was charismatic in a way that few people could ignore. Young, stylish, and confident, he quickly became one of the most recognizable figures in Harlem. People who knew him often described him as generous and smooth-talking, someone who could walk into any room and immediately command attention. Unlike Azie's reserved personality, Rich enjoyed the spotlight. He dressed sharply, drove luxury cars, and carried himself like a celebrity long before social media existed. But behind the flashy image was intelligence. Porter understood business. He knew how to build relationships, how to recruit people, and how to turn small operations into larger networks. Harlem teenagers looked up to him not just because of the money, but because of what he represented: escape from poverty. Through mutual connections, Rich Porter and Azie Faison eventually became close business partners. Together, they expanded rapidly, moving product through Harlem and beyond. They built crews, developed distribution systems, and generated enormous amounts of cash. By the mid-1980s, both men had become major figures in Harlem's underground economy. Then there was Alpo. Alberto Alpo Martinez came from East Harlem and was younger than both Azie and Rich. But he possessed something dangerous: relentless ambition. Friends and rivals alike often described him as fearless, unpredictable, and hungry for power. While Rich Porter thrived on charisma and Azie operated strategically, Alpo seemed driven by something deeper: an obsession with winning. When Alpo entered their circle, the chemistry between the three men initially worked perfectly. Rich and Alpo developed a particularly close friendship. They spent enormous amounts of time together, traveled together, and expanded their operations side by side. To many people in Harlem, they appeared inseparable. As the crack era exploded across New York and Washington, D.C., their wealth increased at astonishing speed. Entire apartments were reportedly filled with cash. Expensive cars lined Harlem streets. Fur coats, jewelry, and designer clothing became symbols of success. Young people across the neighborhood watched them with admiration. They looked untouchable, but the more money that entered the picture, the more pressure built behind the scenes. At first, the money united them. Then it started dividing them. Azie Faison eventually began stepping away from the life. Years later, he would explain that he saw the direction things were heading and wanted out before it consumed him completely. He had witnessed too many people lose themselves to greed, paranoia, and violence. Unlike others, Azie still believed escape was possible, but Rich and Alpo remained fully immersed. The deeper they moved into that world, the more trust began eroding. Stories circulated about hidden money, secret deals, and growing suspicion between different members of their circle. In environments built entirely on loyalty and fear, even rumors could become deadly. One of the biggest turning points came in 1989, when Rich Porter's younger brother, Donald, was kidnapped for ransom. The event shocked Harlem. According to reports and interviews from people close to the situation, the kidnappers demanded hundreds of thousands of dollars for Donald's release. Rich was desperate to save his brother. Friends, associates, and suppliers rallied around him. Among those reportedly helping was Richard Fritz Simmons, the mysterious Harlem supplier later known as the Consignment King, who allegedly gave Rich large quantities of product to help raise money quickly. But despite those efforts, tragedy followed. Donald Porter was murdered. The kidnapping devastated Rich emotionally and psychologically. Those around him later said he became more distrustful after the incident. The streets were becoming darker, more violent, and increasingly unpredictable. At the same time, tensions between Rich and Alpo were escalating. According to accounts from people who knew them, disputes over money and trust had started damaging the friendship. Alpo reportedly believed Rich was hiding profits from him. Others believed Alpo had simply become consumed by ambition and paranoia. Whatever the exact reason, the friendship that once symbolized Harlem's success was beginning to collapse. Then came the moment that changed everything. In January 1990, Rich Porter was murdered in Harlem. The killing sent shockwaves through New York City. For many people in the streets, Rich had seemed untouchable. His death shattered that illusion overnight. Years later, Alpo Martinez admitted his role in Rich Porter's murder while cooperating with federal authorities. The revelation permanently transformed the way many people viewed him.
This ends now. What are you doing? Whoa, put it down! Don't move.
What had once been seen as one of Harlem's greatest friendships became one of the most infamous betrayals in street history. The murder also symbolized something larger, the destruction of an entire era. The flashy optimism of the early crack years was disappearing. In its place came fear, investigations, violence, and federal crackdowns. After Rich's death, Alpo continued operating, particularly in Washington, D.C., where his influence remained strong. There he aligned himself with feared figures like Wayne Perry, whose reputation for violence added an air of fear around Alpo's organization. By the early 1990s, law enforcement agencies had intensified efforts against major networks operating between New York and D.C. Investigators built cases using surveillance, informants, and cooperating witnesses. The government understood that these organizations were no longer isolated street crews. They were structured networks generating millions of dollars. In 1991, Alpo Martinez was arrested in Washington, D.C. Facing enormous prison exposure, he eventually chose to cooperate with federal authorities. His testimony implicated multiple figures, including Wayne Perry. For many people in Harlem and D.C., the decision confirmed what they already believed after Rich Porter's murder. Loyalty in that world always had limits. Alpo received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation and spent decades in federal prison before being released in 2015 under witness protection. Azie Faison, meanwhile, had already stepped away from the streets years earlier. Unlike many others from that era, he survived. Over time, he became one of the most vocal storytellers about Harlem during the crack epidemic, reflecting on both the glamour and destruction of that period. His perspective often carried a sense of regret, not just for individual decisions, but for the impact the era had on entire communities. When Alpo returned publicly to Harlem years after leaving prison, reactions were mixed. Some viewed him as a living legend, others saw him as the embodiment of betrayal. In October 2021, he was shot and killed in Harlem, bringing a violent end to one of the most controversial stories in New York history. Today, the names Rich Porter, Alpo Martinez, and Azie Faison remain deeply tied to Harlem's identity during the 1980s and early 1990s. Their story has become larger than the individuals themselves. It represents friendship, ambition, power, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of an era that transformed New York City forever. For a brief moment, they were young men from Harlem who seemed unstoppable. They had money, influence, and respect. Entire neighborhoods knew their names. Teenagers wanted to imitate them. The streets treated them like celebrities. But beneath the luxury cars and expensive clothes was a world built on instability. Trust could disappear overnight. Friendships could become rivalries. And survival often depended on making impossible choices. In the end, one walked away, one was murdered by his closest friend, and one spent decades in prison before dying violently in the same streets where his legend began. And that is why their story still fascinates people decades later. Because it wasn't just about money or power, it was about how quickly brotherhood can turn into betrayal when ambition becomes stronger than loyalty.
Man, look at all this. We hit the jackpot. Yeah, more than we thought.
Hell yeah, brothers, we rich.
Yo, you really rocking that pineapple?
Yeah, man, look at it. How you doing? Check this out, cash money. Stacks on stacks all day. Living large, no limits.
We've been making good money lately. Yeah, it's been steady. We should keep it going.
Good to see y'all. What's the word? Same old, man. Good to see you.
This ends now. What are you doing?
Whoa, put it down.
Don't move.